Hi everyone, this is Warren from the Rhapsody Piano Studio. Welcome to today's video. We're going to be learning Habanera from the opera Carmen. You can find links to the sheet music in the description. And in addition to the sheet music, you can also find a full video performance. And for the record, this is for intermediate/late intermediate piano. We're going to divide this arrangement into 3 different sections, and I suggest you practice that way as well. So here is the first part. And I stopped right at the repeat. So the first thing you want to start with is the left hand. This is the signature rhythm of the piece, so make sure you practice until it's automatic. You're going to be repeating this basic rhythmic motif throughout the entire piece. Now I'm going to play for measure 4 where the melody comes in, and we're going to play the first phrase. By the way, every section is going to have 2 phrases. This first one I played is open, and the second one will be closed, and that also applies to the other sections as well. So if we take a look at the right hand, let's start with the first part. When we get to measure 5, you'll notice it's in chords, but it's still important to voice towards the top because that is the melody. You don't want to make it too thick. That's a little bit too much thumb. Although this is still a little bit of an advanced idea, don't worry if you can't get it. Just do what you can. Now the other thing at measure 5 is that we are in triplets. So making sure to get that rhythm and practice evenly. Now measure 7, listen to this rhythm. It's actually 2 different rhythms. We have triplets in 8th notes this time, and then just regular 8th notes here. So I would suggest practicing this 1 beat at a time. Then all together. Because if you don't, the tendency is to play it like this, which I hear my students do all the time. Okay, now I'm going to take it from measure 4, and we're going to play this entire phrase. Okay, now we're going to play the second phrase, starting from measure 8. This is closing out the first phrase. Okay, taking a look at the left hand, the rhythm is exactly the same, but some of the harmonies are different. We have this, which is measure 8 all the way to measure 10, and then measure 11, before going back to our original harmony from the beginning. So I'm going to play that consecutively. Go ahead and listen. Now just taking the right hand, it's pretty much the same, just the melody is a bit different, but all the rhythmic patterns still apply. So here's how it sounds from measure 8. And that's it for practice-wise for this entire section. Let me play the whole thing again before we move on. one quick thing I want to ask you before we continue on, if you're enjoying this video and if you're getting some value out of it, one easy way to support the channel is to hit that like button. So I appreciate that in advance. Now on to the second page and the second section. Let me play the whole thing first, and this is starting at measure 13, the second ending. So I stopped right at measure 21. Now, an obvious thing that is happening here, we are changing keys. We went from D minor to its parallel major. So we're staying in D major even all the way to the end. But besides that, everything is pretty much the same in terms of rhythm and melody. But besides that, the pattern is pretty much the same. So I'm just going to play these hands separate, and then we're going to do hands together. Let's look at the first phrase from measures 13 to measure 17. And actually, the left hand, we don't really need to practice it, because if I play it for you, it's exactly the same notes from the beginning. Here is both hands. Now I'm going to give you the right hand for the next phrase, which is from measure 17 to measure 21. And here's both hands. Now, before we move on to the final section, here it is from the top of the page. And now the third section, it's a little bit of a contrast from the beginning. Why don't you listen to it all the way to the end? So although it's a bit of a contrast, you notice that the rhythm, pretty much the same, especially the right hand. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at the first phrase here, starting from measure 21. Now looking at the second phrase from measures 25 to measure 29. So it actually looks like you're going to split this last section up into 4 different phrases. I was kind of mistaken in the beginning. So it's just this open phrase, close phrase, and it just repeats. So stopping at measure 33, it's similar to the phrase starting at measure 21. And moving on, we just have the coda. Okay, so I'm gonna go back. Let's take it from measure 21 all the way to measure 29. And I'm going to stop and give you some suggestions as we move along. So here, we have thirds. It's still important to think about it as a melody. So if we just take the top note, it should sound just as good even if we include the bottom note. Moving on, it's the same thing. More thirds here. So it's important when you're playing repeated chords or double notes, make sure your wrist is nice and loose. Not too loose, but not too stiff, because it'll create a harsh sound. So you might just do this for a while until you find what you're looking for. Okay, moving on for measure 29. We have our first subito forte there, so make sure to set that up. If we're taking it from measure 28, you want to keep it nice and soft to make that more of a surprise. Then moving on, subito piano. Now here we have a grace note. It's important to play this as light as possible. If you go nice and slow, it's good practice to practice it slow because you want to think of it as melodic. So even if you go faster, you shouldn't make it sound technical. Of course, you're still voicing towards the thumb, but this is not that hard to do because the thumb is one of our thicker digits. So it's easy to get a big sound out of it. Then moving on, another subito forte. Followed by another subito piano. Then here we have the end. You notice here, I did stretch it out. You can take a lot of time because after all, this is from an opera, so you want to make it sound operatic. Giving some time to get to that top note from the thumb. Kind of like you're pulling back, like it's a struggle to reach the top. Now here, make sure these triplets go in time. Because these triplets are now in 16th notes, so they're going to go twice as fast as the 8th notes. Ending with a big flourish. Okay, so I'm going to play this last entire section for you, and that'll be it. Once again, this is measure 21. So thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, subscribe if it's your first time here, hit the notification bell, share this video, and let me know what you think in the comments below. See you next time and happy practicing.